This movie really struck me. It has all the elements of a western: bandits, landscapes, betrayals, shots, and horses. But in essence, it is an intimate drama about loneliness, about the consequences of life as a criminal, a contrast between what the comics say and the harsh reality, personified in the characters of Jesse James and Robert Ford. Jesse, the romanticized bandit in the comics, we don't see him in a romantic way. We see him as a person suffering the consequences of his actions. Not only the physical, but also the mental ones, increasingly suspicious and lonely, and going crazy because of it.
I've been becoming a problem myself.
We see bipolar behavior in him doing atrocities and, moments later, regretting his actions and suffering from them.
Are you alright, Jesse?
Jesse, at the end of the day, has a miserable life, completely opposite to what the comics suggest. Ford, on the other hand, is a fan of Jesse and can't help but idolize him, just like the bandit's way of life. He wants the recognition and fame that Jesse has, and he's determined to get it. However, as he gets to know him more and more, he sees the harsh reality. Realizing Jesse's decadence, Ford teams up with the governor and the police to achieve his mission. Instead of being a recognized bandit, he would be the one to arrest the most famous one and therefore be adored by all. However, by murdering Jesse and achieving the fame he wanted, what he finds is the same loneliness as him. In a way, they both go through opposite and similar paths at the same time. If we take the contrast mentioned before, Jesse starts from the harsh reality of the bandit being persecuted all the time, constantly moving and without even revealing his identity to his own children. When he is assassinated, he acquires even more fame than before. The photos of his body are massively sold, and as a consequence, he's much more idolized. Jesse's path goes from reality to romanticization. Ford, on the other hand, starts off as a young man who idolizes crime and fame. He seeks recognition, but when he finally gets it, he experiences the harsh reality. People consider him a traitor and make fun of him. When he dies, nobody buys his photos, nobody remembers him. He goes from romanticization to reality, and at the same time, both end up being murdered as a result of their actions. However, it is in death that they seek peace. Jesse, known for always carrying his guns with him, in his final moment separates from them, accepting his death. In those last moments, we see him calm, meek, as if he wanted to die. The same thing happens with Ford. Being sorry for murdering Jesse with a disturbed soul, the film, with the narrator's final words, leaves us open to the possibility that, when he died, he finally found peace.
The light going out of his eyes before he could find the right words.
We may think that the last words he failed to say were simply, "Thank you." And this is exactly what happens with his brother, who, mired in depression and illness, ashamed of seeing himself as a coward for being an accomplice of the murder, decides to commit suicide to end his pain. The film shows us that all actions have consequences, not just physical consequences, but spiritual ones. Doing evil may bring us fame and money, but it will undoubtedly destroy our souls. So, if the reality is that the bandit life is a life of loneliness, how does the film show loneliness? Loneliness is not only seen when one is alone. More importantly, it is seen when surrounded by people. How do we show that someone is alone when surrounded by people? One way can be by managing the directions in which the characters move. If we have a group of people and we see that all except one take one direction and the other person takes another direction, we will say that that person separated from the group. In other words, that person is alone on his way. And how do we see Jesse when he walks around town? He goes forward. Nobody else, of all the people there are, walk in the same direction as him. Jesse is alone in his way. The shallow depth of field, concentrating the focus on him, reinforces this concept. And, not coincidentally, in this shot it is mentioned that in the city he is called by a different name.
He was listed in the city directory as Thomas Howard, and he went everywhere unrecognized.
Now, at some point he interacts with people. Let's look at this example where Jesse dines with people from his group. This is an ideal case because they are hiding from Jesse the death of his cousin Wood Height, who, after shooting with Dick Little before executing him, is killed by Ford. The family buried him and is covering up Little, sheltering in a hideout upstairs, while they dine downstairs. Here, the ostracism is even greater, because the rest are plotting against Jesse. How does the film shows us that distance? Let's look at Charlie's shots, one of the most active characters during this scene, who continually tries to generate conversation to distract Jesse. Charlie, in almost all of his shots, appears accompanied by someone, be it a reference or with the entire character. He's alone in very few shots. Now let's look at Jesse's shots. In most of his shots, he's alone. Even with people, he is alone. But Ford is also on this scene. At one point in the scene, Charlie, his brother, begins to tell stories about how Robert idolized Jesse as a boy, and look what happens when Ford tells all the things he and Jesse have in common.
Well, if you'll pardon my saying so, I guess it is interesting the many ways you and I overlap and whatnot. I mean, you begin with our daddies. Your daddy was a pastor at the New Hope Baptist Church, and my daddy was a pastor at the church in Excelsior Springs. You're the youngest of 3 James boys, and I'm the youngest of 5 Ford boys.
Both appear alone in their shots. For a moment, the rest of the people disappear. Ford, like Jesse, is alone. And that's how the movie shows it to us. Finally, there are 2 more things to mention: the cinematography and the music. Both have an imprint that resonates in our heads after seeing the film. They both feel nostalgic, as if they are reminiscing about the best times that are long gone. The film tells the harsh reality, and yet it shows it to us in a very poetic way. After all, even though the story is raw, making a movie about it is ultimately a way to romanticize it. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you wanna see more content like this one, subscribe to the channel to receive a notification every time I upload a video. See you next time.